the night garden of your becoming. You have been walking through rooms of yourself for so long that you've forgotten there are doors. Tonight, in this quiet hour, when the world settles into its ancient rhythm of rest, something inside you whispers that it's time to stop running from what lies in the deeper chambers of your heart. The tenderness you've been afraid to feel sits waiting in the corner of your awareness, patient as starlight. It has been there through every season of your becoming, through every moment when you believed you were too much or not enough. Tonight, you might finally be ready to meet it with open hands. There is a quality of silence that only visits when you stop trying to fix yourself. It arrives like first snow of winter, covering everything in a soft, knowing that what you are seeking has never been lost. You have simply been looking in all the wrong mirrors. Your breath finds its natural rhythm, slow and deep, like waves meeting an ancient shore. Each exhale carries away the weight of the day's pretending. Each inhale brings you closer to the truth that has been waiting in your bones since you were small enough to believe in magic. You've been taught to hide your sadness behind silence, to transform your longing into accomplishment, to make yourself small enough to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold the fullness of who you are. But here, in this threshold between day and dream, you can let yourself expand into all the rooms of your being. The child in you who learned too early that love was something to be earned still lives in your body. She carries the memory of every time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace, every moment you chose safety over authenticity. Tonight, she doesn't need you to save her. She needs you to listen. In the geography of your inner world, there are landscapes you've never dared to explore. Valleys where your grief grows wild like forgotten flowers. Mountains where your anger stands sentinel, protecting what you hold most dear. Rivers where your joy runs free when no one is watching. All of this is yours to reclaim. The stories you tell yourself about why you can't have what you want are the same stories that once kept you alive. They were necessary then, these patterns of protection and proof. But necessity and truth are not the same thing. What once saved you may now be the very thing that keeps you from the love you're seeking. Every night, your dreams try to tell you what daylight refuses to hear. They speak in the language of symbol and sensation, weaving together the threads of your unconscious wisdom into tapestries of meaning that your waking mind struggles to understand. But understanding isn't always the point. Sometimes the point is simply to witness. There is a part of you that has never been wounded. It lives deeper than your history, older than your pain, more essential than any role you've learned to play. This part of you watches with infinite compassion as you navigate the maze of human becoming. It knows something your mind has forgotten about the nature of your worth. The shame you carry, like stones in your pockets, was never yours to begin with. It was passed down through generations of people who learned to shrink their light to survive in a world that feared their brilliance, inherited their survival strategies, along with their eye color and the shape of their hands. But inheritance is not destiny. Tonight, you can set down what was never yours to carry, not with force or willpower, but with a gentle recognition that you are allowed to travel lighter through this life. You are allowed to take up space with your dreams, your desires, your deep and wild knowing of what makes you feel most alive. The loneliness you feel in crowded rooms isn't a flaw in your design. It's your soul's way of telling you that you're hungry for connection that goes deeper than small talk and social media. You're built for intimacy that includes the shadows, for love that doesn't require you to edit yourself into something more palatable. In the quiet spaces between your heartbeats, wisdom lives. It doesn't shout or demand or try to convince you of anything. It simply knows. It knows that you are not broken, even when you feel shattered. It knows that you are not too much, even when others can't hold the intensity of your presence. It knows that you are exactly where you need to be, even when you feel completely lost. The parts of yourself you judge most harshly are often the parts that hold your greatest gifts. Your sensitivity, which you've been told is weakness, is actually your superpower for reading the emotional landscapes of others. Your intensity, which has been labeled as too much, is the fire that fuels your passion for creating beauty in the world. Your deep-feeling nature, which seems impractical in a world that values efficiency, is the source of your capacity for profound love. You have been looking for home in other people's approval, in achievements that glitter but don't satisfy, in relationships that promise to complete you but leave you feeling more fragmented than before. But home was never a destination you could arrive at by changing yourself. Home is the feeling of being fully present in your own skin, comfortable with both your light and your shadows. The anxiety that visits you in the small hours of morning carries messages from the parts of yourself that feel unheard. Instead of pushing it away, what if you could sit with it like you would sit with a frightened child? What if you could ask it what it needs you to know? What if you could listen without trying to fix or change or make it go away? Your anger, which you've been taught to see as ugly or dangerous, is actually one of your most loyal allies. It shows up whenever your boundaries have been crossed, whenever your values have been compromised, whenever someone or something is threatening what you hold sacred. It doesn't need to be tamed or transcended. It needs to be honored as the protector it has always been. The sadness that pools in your chest on quiet Sunday afternoons isn't a sign that something is wrong with your life. It's the natural response of a sensitive heart living in a world that often feels too harsh, too fast, too disconnected from what matters most. This sadness is not your enemy. It's the depth that allows you to feel joy with equal intensity. There are versions of yourself living in your body that you've never met. The artist who creates without needing approval. The lover who gives freely without keeping score. The mystic who sees the sacred in the ordinary. The healer who transforms pain into wisdom. The teacher who shares truth without needing to be right. They're all here, waiting for you to remember that you are not limited to the identity you constructed to survive your childhood. The relationship you have with yourself sets the template for every other relationship in your life. When you learn to speak to yourself with kindness, others mirror that kindness back to you. When you learn to set boundaries with your own self-criticism, you naturally attract people who respect your boundaries. When you learn to love yourself through your imperfections, you stop trying to earn love by being perfect. In the spiral of your healing, you will visit the same wounds again and again, but each time from a different altitude. What once felt like devastating rejection might later reveal itself as divine protection. What once felt like failure might later be recognized as the exact redirection you needed. What once felt like the end of everything might later be seen as the beginning of your real life. The medicine you most need often comes disguised as the thing you most want to avoid, the conversation you keep postponing, the creative project that terrifies you, the trip you keep talking about but never take, the love that asks you to risk everything you've built to protect yourself. The healing isn't always comfortable, but it's always exactly what your soul has been asking for. You are not behind schedule in your life. You are not missing some essential piece of information that everyone else seems to have. You are not broken or defective or fundamentally flawed. You are a human being having a perfectly human experience of learning to love yourself in a world that profits from your self-doubt. The voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough borrowed its vocabulary from people who were afraid of their own inadequacy. It learned to speak by listening to the fears of others, by absorbing the doubts of a culture that has forgotten how to celebrate the unique medicine each person brings to the world. But that voice is not the truth of who you are. Beneath the layers of conditioning and comparison, beneath the masks you wear to belong, and the walls you've built to protect yourself, there is a core of pure being that has never been touched by the world's opinions of you. This essence is your birthright, your true inheritance, the treasure that no one can take from you because it was never separate from you to begin with. Tonight, as you rest in the darkness that holds all possibilities, you can remember that you are not a problem to be solved. You are not a project to be completed or a rough draft waiting for revision. You are a living poem, a walking prayer, a unique expression of the creative force that spins galaxies and grows flowers from seeds. The tears that come in moments of deep recognition are not signs of weakness. They are the body's way of releasing what no longer serves, of making space for new growth, of honoring the journey that has brought you to this moment of grace. Let them fall like rain on the garden of your becoming. Your sensitivity to the suffering of others isn't a burden to be managed. It's a gift that allows you to offer comfort in ways that only someone who has known their own darkness can provide. Your capacity to feel deeply in a world that often feels numb is a form of activism, a way of keeping the heart of humanity alive. The dreams you've been afraid to speak out loud are not selfish fantasies or impractical wishes. They are your soul's way of calling you toward the life that is trying to be born through you. They deserve to be honored, not because they guarantee success or happiness, but because they are part of the unique pattern you came here to weave. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you give others permission to do the same. Every time you speak your truth with kindness, you create space for others to find their voice. Every time you love yourself through your imperfections, you become a beacon for everyone who has forgotten their own worthiness. The spiritual path isn't about transcending your humanity. It's about embracing it so fully that the divine has no choice but to reveal itself through your very human heart. It's about loving yourself so completely that your love becomes a gift to the world. It's about healing your own wounds so thoroughly that you become a safe harbor for others who are still learning to trust their own goodness. In this moment, nothing needs to be different than it is. Your struggles are not evidence of your failure. Your questions are not proof of your ignorance. Your longing is not a sign of your inadequacy. Everything you are experiencing is part of the curriculum your soul designed to learn what it came here to learn. The journey inward is not a journey away from the world. It's a journey toward the part of yourself that can engage with the world from a place of wholeness rather than woundedness, from love rather than fear, from trust rather than control. This is how you become a healing presence in a world that desperately needs your unique medicine. You are allowed to be happy without having earned it. You are allowed to be loved without having proved your worthiness. You are allowed to take up space without having to justify your existence. You are allowed to be exactly who you are in this moment, not who you think you should be or who you're trying to become. The path of awakening doesn't require you to fix yourself first. It invites you to wake up right where you are, with all your human imperfections and beautiful contradictions. It asks you to love what is, not as a way of giving up on growth, but as the foundation from which all authentic transformation grows. Tonight, let yourself rest in the knowing that you are held by something larger than your personal story. Whether you call it love, consciousness, the universe, or the divine, there is an intelligence at work in your life that sees the bigger picture even when you can't. Trust it. Trust yourself. Trust the process that is unfolding through you with such perfect timing. The dark night of the soul isn't a punishment or a mistake. It's the cocoon phase of your transformation, the necessary dissolving that must happen before the butterfly of your true self can emerge. In this darkness, you are not dying. You are being reborn into who you've always been beneath the layers of who you thought you had to be. Your worth was never up for debate. It was established the moment you drew your first breath, written into the fabric of your being like the pattern of your fingerprints. No amount of achievement can increase it. No amount of failure can diminish it. It simply is, like the sun is, like love is, like the ocean is. The healing you seek isn't somewhere else, in some future version of yourself who has it all figured out. It's here, in your willingness to meet this moment with an open heart. It's in your courage to feel what you feel without trying to change it. It's in your decision to stay present with yourself, even when presence feels like the hardest thing in the world. There is something ancient and wise that moves through you when you stop trying to control your experience and start learning to dance with it. This wisdom knows how to metabolize pain into compassion, how to transform resistance into resilience, how to alchemize the raw materials of your human experience into something beautiful and meaningful. The masks you wear in the world serve a purpose, but they are not who you are. Beneath the professional persona, beneath the helpful friend, beneath the strong one who holds it all together, there is a wild and tender being who longs to be seen and loved for who they truly are, not for what they do or how well they perform their assigned roles. This true self doesn't need to be improved or upgraded or fixed. It needs to be remembered, welcomed home, given space to breathe and stretch and express itself authentically. It needs to be loved not despite its imperfections, but because of them. Because those imperfections are what make you uniquely, irreplaceably you. The places where you feel most broken are often the places where the light gets in. Your wounds become windows. Your struggles become strengths. Your deepest challenges become your greatest gifts to others who are walking similar paths. Nothing in your experience has been wasted. Everything has contributed to the magnificent complexity of who you are becoming. You've been told that healing means feeling better, but sometimes healing means feeling everything you've been afraid to feel. Sometimes healing means breaking open so completely that there's no way to put the pieces back together in the same configuration. Sometimes healing means discovering that you were never broken in the first place. The stories that have shaped your understanding of love and worth and belonging were written by people who were doing their best with the consciousness they had available to them. But their limitations don't have to become your limitations. Their fears don't have to become your fears. Their unlived dreams don't have to become your unlived dreams. Tonight you can begin writing new stories. Stories where you are the hero of your own journey rather than a victim of circumstance. Stories where your sensitivity is celebrated rather than shamed. Stories where your questions are more important than your answers. Stories where your becoming matters more than your arrival. The inner child who still lives in your heart carries not only your wounds, but also your wonder. She remembers what it felt like to be amazed by butterflies and fascinated by clouds and delighted by the taste of ice cream on a summer day. She knows how to play, how to laugh, how to love without condition or reservation. This inner child doesn't need to be fixed or healed or rescued. She needs to be invited back into your life as an ally, as a guide to the kind of aliveness that gets buried under the weight of adult responsibilities and expectations. She needs to be consulted when you're making decisions about how to spend your precious time and energy. The parts of yourself that you've disowned in order to be acceptable haven't disappeared. They've gone underground, waiting for you to create enough safety to welcome them back. Your wildness, your darkness, your fierce protectiveness, your raw vulnerability, your untamed creativity. All of these aspects of yourself want to be integrated consciously rather than expressed unconsciously. This integration doesn't happen through analysis or understanding alone. Happens through embodied experience, through creative expression, through relationships that can hold the fullness of who you are, through practices that connect you to your deeper wisdom, through moments of profound presence when all your parts feel seen and accepted. The feminine aspects of your psyche, whether you identify as male, female, or non-binary, carry the gifts of receptivity, intuition, emotional intelligence, and the capacity to create and nurture life. These qualities have been devalued in a culture that prioritizes action over being, thinking over feeling, producing over receiving, but they are essential for wholeness. The masculine aspects of your psyche carry the gifts of clarity, direction, protective strength, and the capacity to manifest dreams into reality. These qualities have been distorted in a culture that confuses dominance with strength, aggression with assertion, emotional numbness with stability. But in their healthy expression, they are also essential for wholeness. The integration of these inner masculine and feminine energies doesn't depend on your gender identity or sexual orientation. It's about recognizing and honoring all the different capacities that exist within your psyche, learning to access them consciously, and discovering how they can work together in service of your highest good and the good of others. When these energies are in harmony within you, you don't need to seek completion through romantic relationships. You become capable of interdependence rather than codependence, of loving from wholeness rather than neediness, of offering your gifts without depleting yourself, of receiving support without losing your sense of self. The journey toward this inner harmony is not always smooth or comfortable. There are times when the different parts of yourself seem to be at war with each other. The part that wants security conflicts with the part that craves adventure. The part that needs solitude conflicts with the part that longs for connection. The part that seeks to please conflicts with the part that demands authenticity. These inner conflicts are not problems to be solved, but polarities to be held, learning to be comfortable with contradiction, with not knowing, with the tension between opposing desires is one of the most important skills you can develop. It protects you from the black and white thinking that causes so much suffering in relationships and communities. The wise woman or wise man who lives within your psyche can hold these contradictions with grace. This inner figure doesn't have all the answers, but knows how to ask the right questions. Doesn't promise to eliminate suffering, but offers the companionship that makes suffering bearable. Doesn't provide simple solutions, but helps you find meaning in complexity. This inner wisdom figure appears in your dreams, sometimes as a teacher, a grandmother, a monk, a witch, a therapist, or any other form that your unconscious chooses to communicate profound knowing. These dream figures are not separate from you, but aspects of your own deepest intelligence trying to get your attention. Learning to dialogue with these inner figures through dream work, active imagination, or simply quiet reflection can provide guidance that no external authority can offer. This doesn't mean ignoring practical advice or professional help when you need it. It means developing trust in your own capacity to know what's right for your unique situation. The shadow aspects of your personality, the parts you've tried to hide or eliminate, are not your enemies. They are the repository of your disowned power, your unclaimed gifts, your unlived potential. Your anger might contain your passion. Your selfishness might contain your self-respect. Your darkness might contain your depth. The work with shadow doesn't involve acting out every impulse or expressing every dark thought. It involves acknowledging these aspects of yourself with curiosity rather than judgment, learning to channel their energy constructively, and recognizing when you're projecting your disowned qualities onto others. When you stop trying to be good all the time and start learning to be whole, you become more authentic, more powerful, and paradoxically more capable of genuine goodness. You stop being good to avoid rejection and start being good because goodness naturally flows from a heart that has made peace with its own complexity. The persona you wear in different situations, professional, social, familial, serves important functions in navigating the complexities of human society. But when you become too identified with any particular persona, you lose touch with the deeper truth of who you are. You start believing that you are the role you play, rather than the consciousness that plays all roles. The practice of conscious persona work involves recognizing when you're putting on a mask, choosing consciously which mask is appropriate for each situation, and staying connected to your essential self even while wearing different personas. It's like being an actor who never forgets that they are more than any character they portray. This doesn't mean being false or manipulative. It means recognizing that authenticity doesn't require you to express every aspect of yourself in every situation. It means learning to be skillfully authentic, sharing different facets of your wholeness depending on what the moment calls for and what feels safe and appropriate. The relationship between your personal unconscious and the collective unconscious is like the relationship between a drop of water and the ocean. Your individual psyche is connected to the psyche of all humanity through shared archetypal patterns, universal themes, and the deep structures of consciousness that transcend cultural and historical differences. This means that your personal healing work contributes to the healing of the collective human psyche. When you integrate your shadow, you reduce the amount of unconscious projection in the world. When you heal your relationship with power, you contribute to the healing of power dynamics in society. When you learn to love yourself, you increase the field of love available to everyone. The archetypal energies that live in your psyche are not just personal, but transpersonal. The mother in you connects you to the eternal feminine principle that nurtures and protects life. The Father in you connects you to the eternal masculine principle that provides structure and guidance. The child in you connects you to the eternal principle of wonder and possibility. These archetypal energies want to express themselves through your unique personality and circumstances. The mother might express herself through your caregiving, your creativity, or your relationship with the natural world. The father might express himself through your leadership, your mentoring, or your commitment to justice. The child might express itself through your playfulness, your curiosity, or your capacity for joy. When these archetypal energies are unconscious, they can take possession of you in ways that feel compulsive or overwhelming. You might find yourself in the grip of the terrible mother who devours rather than nurtures, or the tyrannical father who dominates rather than guides, or the eternal child who refuses to take responsibility for their choices. The work of consciousness involves developing a relationship with these archetypal energies so that you can access their gifts without being overwhelmed by their shadow expressions. This happens through practices that honor the sacred dimension of your psyche while keeping you grounded in your human limitations and responsibilities. The symbol-making function of your psyche is constantly at work, creating images and metaphors that bridge the gap between conscious understanding, and unconscious knowing. These symbols appear in your dreams, your creative expressions, your attractions and aversions, and the meaningful coincidences that seem to weave your inner and outer experience together. Learning to read the symbolic language of your psyche is like learning to read poetry. The meaning is not always literal or logical, but emerges from the interplay of image, emotion, and association. A snake in your dream might represent transformation, healing, wisdom, sexuality, or danger, depending on your personal associations and the context of the dream. The same symbol can mean different things at different times in your life. The house that once represented security might later represent limitation. The ocean that once felt overwhelming might later feel like home. The symbols evolve as you evolve, always offering exactly the medicine your psyche needs for the next stage of your development. Your attraction to certain symbols, images, or metaphors is not random. Your psyche is drawn to the symbols that carry the energy you need for healing, growth, or creative expression. The mandala that catches your eye, the poem that makes you cry, the song that gives you chills. These are all communications from your unconscious about what wants to be integrated or expressed. Creating your own symbols through art, writing, movement, or any other form of creative expression can be a powerful way of collaborating with your unconscious wisdom. The process of allowing images to emerge without your rational mind controlling every aspect of their creation often reveals insights that thinking alone cannot provide. The therapeutic power of symbol work lies not in interpreting symbols correctly, but in entering into relationship with them. When you spend time with a symbol that has emerged from your depths, whether through dreams, meditation, or creative expression, you allow it to work on you at levels deeper than conscious understanding. This is why ancient spiritual traditions have always used symbols, myths, and rituals to facilitate transformation. These practices engage the whole person, body, mind, heart, and soul in ways that purely intellectual approaches cannot. They speak to the parts of you that learn through experience rather than explanation. The individuation process that the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung described is not a destination you arrive at, but a way of being that you embody more fully over time. It's the ongoing journey of becoming who you truly are beneath all the conditioning, expectations, and identifications that have accumulated throughout your life. This process involves developing a conscious relationship with all aspects of your inner psyche, the light and the shadow, the personal and the transpersonal, the rational and the irrational. It requires the courage to face what you've been avoiding, the humility to admit what you don't know about yourself, and the compassion to love yourself through the process of discovery. Individuation is not about becoming perfect or eliminating all your problems. It's about becoming whole, which includes accepting your imperfections, integrating your contradictions, and finding meaning in your struggles. It's about learning to be authentically yourself rather than trying to be who you think you should be. The goal is not to achieve some final state of enlightenment or psychological health, but to develop the capacity to meet whatever arises in your life with consciousness, compassion, and creative response. It's about becoming a conscious participant in your own becoming rather than a victim of unconscious patterns and external circumstances. This work requires patience because the psyche operates on its own timeline, which is often much slower than the ego's desire for quick fixes and immediate results. Healing happens in layers. Insights emerge gradually, and integration takes time. The psyche will not be rushed, but it will not abandon the process either. The relationship with the unconscious that Jung pioneered through his own personal work and his therapeutic practice offers a middle way between the extremes of rational materialism and irrational spirituality. It honors both the reality of the psyche and the reality of the physical world, both the importance of individual development and the needs of collective healing. This approach recognizes that humans are not just biological machines responding to environmental stimuli, but meaning-making beings who need connection to something larger than their personal concerns. At the same time, it recognizes that spiritual experiences must be grounded in psychological development and embodied practice. The active imagination technique that Jung developed involves engaging with the images, figures, and scenarios that arise spontaneously in your imagination, as if they were real beings with their own intelligence and agency. This practice can provide access to parts of yourself that don't communicate through rational language. You might imagine yourself having a conversation with a dream figure, or allow yourself to enter a landscape that appeared in meditation, or visualize yourself as an animal and explore what that creature wants to teach you. The key is to approach these imaginal experiences with respect and curiosity, rather than trying to control or manipulate them. Active imagination is not escapist fantasy, but a legitimate way of gathering information from your unconscious. The figures and scenarios that emerge often carry exactly the guidance, healing, or creative inspiration that your conscious mind has been seeking. They offer perspectives that your ego could never generate on its own. The practice requires a delicate balance between participation and observation. You want to engage fully with the imaginal experience while maintaining enough conscious awareness to remember and integrate what happens. It's like being simultaneously the actor and the audience in the theater of your own psyche. Regular engagement with active imagination can help you develop a more collaborative relationship with your unconscious, rather than trying to dominate it with willpower or ignore it through distraction. It can also help you access creative solutions to problems that logical thinking cannot solve. The dream work that forms such an important part of Jung's approach is not about finding the one correct interpretation of your dreams, but about developing an ongoing dialogue with the images and stories that emerge from your unconscious during sleep. Dreams are like letters from your deeper self, offering guidance, warnings, creative inspiration, and opportunities for healing. Your dreams speak in a language older than words, using symbols, emotions, and sensory experiences to communicate what your rational mind needs to know but cannot access directly. The meaning of your dreams emerges not from universal symbol dictionaries, but from your personal associations, your current life circumstances, and the larger patterns that are unfolding in your individuation process. Some dreams seem to comment on your daily life, helping you process experiences and emotions that you haven't fully digested while awake. Other dreams seem to reach into deeper layers of your psyche, offering glimpses of unlived possibilities, unrecognized aspects of yourself, or wisdom that transcends your personal history. The practice of recording your dreams, spending time with their images, and allowing their meanings to emerge gradually can become a form of ongoing therapy that doesn't require a therapist. Your unconscious knows exactly what you need to see, feel, and understand for your continued growth and healing. You don't have to remember your dreams every night or understand every symbol that appears. The simple act of paying attention to your dream life and treating it as meaningful sends a message to your unconscious that you're interested in what it has to offer. This often leads to more vivid dreams and clearer communication over time. The process of amplification that Jung used in working with dreams and other unconscious material involves exploring the personal and cultural associations that surround particular symbols or themes. This helps expand your understanding of what your psyche might be trying to communicate through specific images or experiences. For example, if you dream of a tree, you might explore what trees mean to you personally, what role they've played in your life, what emotions they evoke, and what they represent in various cultural and spiritual traditions. This amplification process helps you understand the multiple layers of meaning that might be present in any given symbol. The goal is not to reduce the symbol to a single meaning, but to expand your relationship with it, to see it from multiple angles, to let it reveal its richness and complexity. This process often leads to insights that a purely personal or purely universal interpretation would miss. Amplification can also be applied to life events, relationship patterns, creative projects, or any other aspect of your experience that seems to carry symbolic significance. The practice helps you see the archetypal dimensions of your personal experience and the personal dimensions of universal themes. The concept of synchronicity that Jung introduced describes meaningful coincidences that seem to suggest a connection between inner psychological states and outer events. These experiences point to a level of reality where consciousness and matter, psyche and world, are more intimately connected than our rational worldview usually acknowledges. Synchronicity is not about believing that everything happens for a predetermined reason or that the universe is constantly sending you messages. It's about remaining open to the possibility that meaning can emerge from the intersection of inner readiness and outer opportunity, especially during times of significant psychological transformation. Learning to recognize synchronicity requires developing a different kind of attention, one that notices patterns across time, that sees connections between seemingly unrelated events, that remains curious about the ways your inner and outer experience might be related. It's like learning to read the poetry that life is always writing. This doesn't mean becoming superstitious or giving up critical thinking. It means expanding your definition of intelligence to include the non-rational wisdom that operates through intuition, through bodily knowing, through the subtle communications between psyche and world that indigenous cultures have always recognized. When you're in the midst of a significant life transition or psychological transformation, you might notice that synchronicities become more frequent or more obvious. This seems to be the psyche's way of providing confirmation that you're aligned with a deeper process of growth and change. The practice of paying attention to synchronicity can become a way of collaborating with the intelligence that Jung called the self, the organizing principle of the psyche that orchestrates your development in ways that transcend your conscious planning and control. This collaboration doesn't replace practical action, but enriches it with a sense of meaning and purpose. The transcendent function that Jung described is the psychological mechanism that bridges the gap between conscious and unconscious, between rational and irrational, between opposing forces within the psyche. This function is activated through practices that honor both thinking and feeling, both logic and intuition. Creative expression, meditation, dream work, active imagination, and mindful attention to synchronicity are all ways of engaging the transcendent function. These practices help you access information and perspectives that your conscious mind alone cannot provide, while staying grounded in practical reality. The transcendent function doesn't resolve conflicts by choosing one side over another, but by finding a third way that includes and transcends both positions. It's like learning to hold paradox without needing to collapse it into a simple either-or choice. You can be both confident and uncertain, both independent and interdependent, both accepting and committed to growth. This capacity for holding paradox is essential for psychological maturity. It allows you to be comfortable with ambiguity, to tolerate not knowing, to remain open to possibilities you haven't yet imagined. Protects you from the fundamentalism that arises when you need everything to fit into neat categories. The development of the transcendent function is not something you can force or achieve through willpower. It emerges naturally when you create the right conditions, when you're willing to sit with uncertainty, when you can tolerate the tension between opposites, when you trust the process of becoming, rather than demanding immediate resolution. The relationship between individual healing and collective healing was central to Jung's understanding of psychology. He believed that the work you do to integrate your personal shadow contributes to the integration of the collective shadow of humanity. Your healing ripples out beyond your personal life to touch the lives of everyone you encounter. This is why inner work isn't selfish, even when it requires you to turn your attention away from external achievements and responsibilities. When you heal, your own capacity for unconscious projection, you stop contributing to the cycles of blame and victimization that perpetuate suffering in relationships and communities. When you learn to love your own shadow, you become less likely to demonize the shadow in others. When you integrate your own capacity for destruction and creation, you become less likely to split the world into heroes and villains. When you accept your own contradictions, you become more capable of holding space for the contradictions in others. Jung saw the emergence of individual consciousness as part of the evolutionary development of human consciousness as a whole. Each person who does the work of becoming conscious contributes to the awakening of the species. Your personal individuation is your unique contribution to the larger human project of growing up psychologically and spiritually. This doesn't mean you're responsible for saving the world through your personal development. It means that your commitment to truth, authenticity, and wholeness matters not only for your own life, but for life itself. It means that your willingness to face your own darkness with compassion is a gift to everyone who is still afraid of their shadow. The work of consciousness is never finished because consciousness itself is always evolving. Each generation faces new challenges that require new levels of psychological and spiritual development. The problems of our time call for individuals who can hold complexity, paradox, and uncertainty without falling into despair or rigidity. Your personal healing work is preparation for participating consciously in the collective challenges of our time. When you know your own triggers, you're less likely to react unconsciously to the triggers in the collective. When you've learned to navigate your own inner conflicts, you're better equipped to help navigate conflicts in your communities. When you've discovered your own authentic voice, you're more likely to speak truth in situations where truth-telling is difficult but necessary. When you've learned to love yourself through your imperfections, you're more capable of extending that same quality of love to a world that is also imperfect and also deserving of love. The spiritual dimension of Jung's psychology isn't separate from the psychological dimension, but integral to it. He understood that humans have an innate need for meaning, for connection to something larger than the personal ego, for experiences of the sacred. When this need is ignored or suppressed, psychological symptoms often arise. But Jung was suspicious of organized religion that demanded belief without experience, that provided answers without encouraging questions, that promised salvation without requiring psychological development. He was more interested in the direct experience of the sacred that comes through dreams, synchronicity, creative expression, and the encounter with the transcendent function within the psyche. This doesn't mean rejecting religious traditions, but approaching them as sources of wisdom rather than authorities to be obeyed without question. The myths, symbols, and practices of various spiritual traditions can be valuable resources for psychological development when engaged with consciousness and discrimination. The experience of the sacred that Jung wrote about isn't necessarily otherworldly or mystical. It can be as simple as the moment when you feel completely present in your own life, when the ordinary world reveals its extraordinary nature, when you feel connected to the web of existence that includes all beings. These moments of sacred experience often arise spontaneously during the individuation process. As you become more authentic, more whole, more aligned with your deeper nature, you naturally feel more connected to the deeper nature of existence itself. The boundary between self and world becomes more permeable. The sense of separation that creates so much suffering begins to dissolve. But Jung warned against spiritual bypassing, using spiritual practices or beliefs to avoid the difficult work of psychological integration. True spiritual development requires psychological development. You can't transcend what you haven't first included. You can't love unconditionally until you've learned to love yourself conditionally. The path of individuation is ultimately a path of service. As you become more conscious, more authentic, more whole, you naturally become more available to contribute your unique gifts to the world. But this service flows from wholeness rather than woundedness, from choice rather than compulsion, from love rather than obligation. You don't have to figure out how to save the world or solve all the problems of humanity. You just have to be willing to show up as who you really are, to offer what you have to offer, to respond to what life is asking of you with as much consciousness and compassion as you can muster in each moment. This is enough. This is everything. This is how individual healing contributes to collective healing, how personal awakening serves the awakening of all beings, how your willingness to become who you truly are creates space for others to do the same. The mirror that your relationships hold up to you reflects not only your wounds, but also your beauty, not only your limitations, but also your potential, not only your patterns, but also your possibilities. Every person who triggers you is offering you information about some aspect of yourself that wants to be seen, understood, or integrated. This doesn't mean that other people's behavior is your responsibility, or that you should accept mistreatment in the name of spiritual growth. It means that your emotional responses to others can be doorways to deeper self-knowledge if you're willing to explore them with curiosity, rather than immediately judging the other person as wrong or bad. The people you admire most intensely often carry projections of your own unlived potential. The qualities you see in them that seem so foreign to your own nature might actually be aspects of yourself that are waiting to be developed. The people you judge most harshly often carry projections of your own disowned shadow qualities. Learning to withdraw these projections, to recognize when you're seeing your own unlived potential or disowned shadow in another person, is one of the most important skills you can develop for psychological maturity. It allows you to reclaim your power, to take responsibility for your own development, and to see other people more clearly. This process of projection and withdrawal happens throughout your life as you encounter different people who activate different aspects of your psyche. Each relationship becomes an opportunity to know yourself more fully, to integrate what you've disowned, to develop what you've neglected, to heal what you've wounded. The capacity to love deeply and authentically emerges not from finding the perfect person, but from doing the inner work that allows you to show up as your whole self in relationship. When you're not trying to get your unmet childhood needs met by your partner, you're free to love them for who they actually are, rather than who you need them to be. When you're not trying to avoid your own difficult emotions by managing your partner's emotional state, you're free to offer genuine support rather than anxious caretaking. When you're not trying to prove your worth through being needed, you're free to contribute to the relationship from generosity rather than desperation. The feminine principle in your psyche, regardless of your gender identity, carries the gifts of receptivity, intuition, emotional wisdom, and the capacity to create and nurture life in all its forms. In a culture that has devalued these qualities in favor of masculine attributes like action, logic, and achievement, many people have lost touch with their inner feminine. Reclaiming your connection to the feminine principle doesn't mean becoming passive or emotional in stereotypical ways. It means learning to trust your intuitive knowing, to honor your need for cyclical rhythms rather than linear progress, to value being as much as doing, to receive support as gracefully as you offer it. The healthy masculine principle in your psyche carries the gifts of clarity, direction, protective strength, and the capacity to manifest dreams into reality. In a culture that has distorted these qualities into dominance, aggression, and emotional numbness, many people have developed fear or resentment toward masculine energy. Reclaiming your connection to the healthy masculine principle doesn't mean becoming controlling or emotionally shut down. It means learning to set clear boundaries, to take decisive action when necessary, to protect what you value, to channel your creative power toward meaningful goals. The integration of these inner masculine and feminine energies creates a foundation for psychological wholeness that doesn't depend on external validation or romantic completion. You become capable of both giving and receiving, both creating and receiving, both leading and following, depending on what each situation calls for. This inner marriage of masculine and feminine energies is symbolized in many spiritual traditions by images of divine couples. Shiva and Shakti in Hinduism, the yin-yang symbol in Taoism, the alchemical marriage in Western esoteric traditions. These symbols point to the possibility of wholeness that includes both dynamic and receptive qualities. The archetypal mother who lives in your psyche wants to nurture, protect, and encourage growth in yourself and others. When this energy is healthy, it manifests as genuine care, creativity, and the ability to create safe spaces for healing. Development. When it's wounded or unconscious, it can manifest as smothering, martyrdom, or the inability to let others grow into their own authority. The archetypal father who lives in your psyche wants to provide structure, guidance, and protection for what you value most. When this energy is healthy, it manifests as wisdom, leadership, and the ability to create containers for growth and achievement. When it's wounded or unconscious, it can manifest as authoritarianism, rigidity, or the abandonment of responsibility. The archetypal child who lives in your psyche carries your capacity for wonder, play, spontaneity, and trusting connection to life. When this energy is healthy, it manifests as curiosity, creativity, and the ability to approach life with beginner's mind. When it's wounded or unconscious, it can manifest as narcissism, irresponsibility, or the inability to tolerate frustration. The archetypal lover who lives in your psyche wants to connect deeply with life, beauty, passion, and other beings. When this energy is healthy, it manifests as appreciation, sensuality, and the ability to be moved by beauty in all its forms. When it's wounded or unconscious, it can manifest as addiction, codependency, or the inability to maintain appropriate boundaries. The archetypal warrior who lives in your psyche wants to fight for what matters, to protect what you value, to overcome obstacles to your growth and service. When this energy is healthy, it manifests as courage, determination, and the ability to take necessary action even when it's difficult. When it's wounded or unconscious, it can manifest as aggression, violence, or the inability to stand up for yourself and others. The archetypal sage who lives in your psyche wants to understand, to see truth, to share wisdom gained through experience. When this energy is healthy, it manifests as discernment, teaching ability, and the capacity to learn from both success and failure. When it's wounded or unconscious, it can manifest as intellectual arrogance, cynicism, or the inability to translate knowledge into practical action. These archetypal energies are not roles you need to play perfectly, but capacities you can develop and express in ways that are authentic to your unique personality and circumstances. The goal is not to embody every archetype equally, but to have conscious access to the ones that are most relevant to your life purpose and current developmental needs. The shadow aspects of these archetypal energies also want to be integrated consciously rather than disowned or projected onto others. The terrible mother who devours rather than nurtures, the tyrannical father who dominates rather than guides, the entitled child who demands rather than receives. These are all aspects of yourself that need to be acknowledged and channeled constructively. When you can own your capacity for both nurturing and devouring, both guiding and controlling, both receiving and demanding, you become less likely to be possessed by these energies unconsciously. You can access their power when it's needed while maintaining conscious choice about how you express them. The integration of archetypal energies happens not through thinking about them, but through embodied experience. You might explore the warrior energy through martial arts, competitive sports, or advocacy work. You might explore the mother energy through gardening, cooking, or mentoring. You might explore the lover energy through art, music, or conscious relationship. The key is to find expressions that feel authentic to you, rather than trying to force yourself into stereotypical roles or behaviors. The archetypes want to live through your unique personality, not replace it with generic patterns. They want to enhance your individual expression, not diminish it. The anima and animus that Jung wrote about represent the contrasexual aspects of your psyche, the inner feminine. In masculine, identified people, and the inner masculine in feminine, identified people. These inner figures serve as bridges between consciousness and the unconscious, often appearing in dreams as guides, teachers, or love interests. Developing a conscious relationship with your anima or animus can reduce your tendency to project these qualities onto romantic partners and expect them to provide what you haven't yet developed in yourself. Instead of seeking completion through relationship, you become capable of offering completeness to relationship. The anima often appears initially as a romantic fantasy figure, the perfect woman who embodies everything the masculine psyche thinks it lacks. But as the relationship with the anima matures, she becomes less of an object of desire and more of a source of wisdom about the value of receptivity, intuition, and emotional depth. The animus often appears initially as a powerful masculine figure, the perfect man who embodies everything the feminine psyche thinks it lacks. But as the relationship with the animus matures, he becomes less of an object of admiration and more of a source of wisdom about the value of clarity, direction, and the capacity to manifest goals in the world. The development of the anima or animus relationship happens through dialogue, either in dreams, active imagination, or creative expression. These inner figures have their own perspectives, preferences, and wisdom to offer. They want to be consulted, not controlled. They want to be heard, not ignored. When the anima or animus is undeveloped or unconscious, it can create problems in relationships. You might find yourself attracted to people who carry these projections, but who can't possibly live up to the archetypal expectations you've placed on them. Or you might find yourself trying to be the anima or animus figure for others, losing yourself in the process. The goal is not to eliminate the anima or animus, but to develop a conscious, mature relationship with these inner figures so that they can serve their proper function as bridges to the unconscious and sources of creative inspiration rather than as compulsions that drive your relationship choices unconsciously. The self with a capital S that Jung wrote about is the archetype of wholeness, the organizing principle of the psyche that includes and transcends the ego. The self is not something you achieve or become, but something you already are at the deepest level of your being. The spiritual journey is about remembering and embodying this self more fully. Encounters with the self often come through experiences that temporarily dissolve the boundaries of ordinary consciousness. Through meditation, creative expression, experiences in nature, moments of profound love, or grief, or what Jung called the religious experience. These encounters can be deeply transformative, offering glimpses of your essential nature. But Jung emphasized that these peak experiences must be integrated into ordinary life rather than becoming escapes from the responsibilities and challenges of human existence. The self wants to express itself through your personality, not replace it. It wants to enhance your humanity, not transcend it. The relationship with the self develops gradually through the individuation process as you become more conscious of your patterns, more accepting of your contradictions, more aligned with your authentic values. You naturally feel more connected to this deeper organizing principle of your psyche. The self often communicates through synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to orchestrate experiences that are exactly what you need for your continued growth and healing. Learning to recognize and collaborate with these synchronistic patterns can become a way of aligning your personal will with the larger intelligence that Jung called the self. But the self is not a personal possession or achievement. It connects you to the transpersonal dimensions of existence, to the collective unconscious, to the archetypal patterns that shape human experience, to the mystery that transcends individual consciousness while including its. The encounter with the self often comes at times of crisis or transition, when the ego's strategies for maintaining control are no longer working. These dark nights of the soul can feel like death or dissolution, but they are actually opportunities for rebirth into a more authentic and conscious way of being. The process of surrendering to the self doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up personal responsibility. It means learning to distinguish between what you can control and what you cannot, between your personal will and the larger will that works through you, between forcing outcomes and allowing them to emerge. This surrender is paradoxically empowering because it aligns you with the creative intelligence that has been orchestrating your development all along. Instead of fighting against the current of your own becoming, you learn to flow with it while still making conscious choices about how you respond to what arises. The mandala symbol that fascinated Jung represents this relationship between the ego and the self. The circle represents wholeness. The center represents the self, and the various patterns within the circle represent the different aspects of the personality organized around this central principle. Creating mandalas, whether through drawing, painting, arranging objects in circular patterns, or even just doodling, can be a way of connecting with your own center. When life feels chaotic or fragmented, the process of creating circular wholeness on paper or in physical space can support the process of creating psychological wholeness in your inner world. But Jung warned against turning symbols into rigid formulas or magical solutions. The mandala that helps you feel centered today might feel constraining tomorrow. The power of symbols lies in their ability to facilitate transformation, not in their literal content. They are tools for development, not destinations to reach. The collective